The wind whispers through the tall grass where thousands once stood shoulder to shoulder, their voices now swallowed by time. Beneath your feet, hidden in the soil, lie rusted swords and shattered bones, silent witnesses to battles the world has forgotten. These are the lost battlefields, places where history was written in blood and then erased by the centuries. Today we uncover 20 of these vanished battlegrounds, each with secrets waiting to be told. From forests that still remember the clash of Roman legions to jungles hiding the last traces of World War II, these are stories of courage, betrayal, and mysteries buried by time. Why did entire armies disappear without a trace? How could the earth swallow battlefields whole? And what happens when modern explorers stumble upon these forgotten graves? The answers lie ahead as we step onto ground where history still echoes. If you know how to listen, stay with us because the past has a way of reaching into the present when you least expect it. Now let's step into the shadowy depths of the Teutoburg Forest, where one of Rome's most devastating defeats unfolded. In the year 9, 3 elite Roman legions marched confidently into these woods, unaware they were walking into a carefully laid trap. Their commander, Arminius, was a Germanic prince raised in Rome, a man who knew the empire's tactics intimately. He turned that knowledge against his former allies, leading a coalition of tribes in a brutal ambush that would echo through history. Over 3 days, the forest itself seemed to turn against the Romans. Rain turned paths to mud, and the narrow trails funneled them into killing zones where Germanic warriors struck from the trees. By the end, not a single legion survived intact. The disaster was so complete that Emperor Augustus, upon hearing the news, reportedly wandered his palace, crying out, "Quintilius Varus, give me back my legions." But the story doesn't end with the battle. For centuries, the exact location of this clash remained one of history's great mysteries. The dense forest and shifting landscapes of northern Germany hid the evidence well. It wasn't until the 1980s that archaeologists began uncovering clues: rusty spearheads, bent Roman nails from marching boots, even a gruesome pit filled with bones bearing the marks of battle. These finds sparked fierce debates. Was the battlefield near Kalkris where most artifacts were found, or did the fighting sprawl across miles of forest? The search continues, with every discovery offering new pieces to this ancient puzzle. For Rome, the loss was more than military. It was a psychological blow that reshaped the empire's ambitions. The defeat halted Roman expansion into Germania, turning the Rhine into a permanent border. Some historians argue this single battle altered the course of European history, preventing Latin culture from taking root in lands that would one day become Germany. Yet the Teutoburg Forest secrets aren't all buried. Recent studies suggest some Roman survivors may have been absorbed into Germanic tribes, their stories lost but their bloodlines enduring. As we leave these haunted woods, one question lingers: how many more legacies of that bloody September still lie hidden beneath the moss and leaves? But the mystery of Teutoburg Forest doesn't end with ancient bones and rusted weapons. Fast forward to modern times, where technology and persistence are peeling back layers of this centuries-old enigma. Archaeologists armed with metal detectors have become the new explorers of this forgotten battlefield, scanning the earth for whispers of that fateful clash. One of the most significant breakthroughs came near Kalkris, where a single coin minted between the years 7 and 11 pointed like an arrow to the battle's timeline. Then came the flood of smaller finds: Roman sandal nails, bent spear tips, even a silver mask from a cavalry helmet, all scattered like breadcrumbs across the forest floor. Yet not everyone agrees Kalkris tells the full story. Some researchers argue the battle sprawled over miles, with skirmishes erupting at multiple points as the Romans tried desperately to regroup. Soil analysis reveals patches of earth rich with iron and lead, hinting at smaller, undiscovered engagement sites. Then there's the human element. Local farmers occasionally stumble upon artifacts while plowing fields, their discoveries adding new dots to connect on this ancient map. The debate grows even hotter when it comes to interpreting what these finds mean. Were the scattered clusters of weapons proof of a running battle? Did the Germanic tribes deliberately leave certain areas untouched, herding the Romans like prey? Every theory sparks fresh expeditions, with teams using ground-penetrating radar to peer beneath the soil without disturbing it. One tantalizing lead suggests a mass grave still lies hidden, possibly holding the remains of Varus himself. What makes Teutoburg unique isn't just the scale of the defeat, it's how modern tools keep rewriting its story. Each summer, archaeologists return, their tools a little sharper, their maps a little more detailed. And as they do, the forest slowly yields its secrets piece by piece, reminding us that some battles never truly end, they just wait to be rediscovered. Now let's journey from the dense forests of Germania to the scorching sands of the Near East, where another Roman disaster unfolded, one that would haunt the empire for decades. The year is 53 BC, and the wealthy but overconfident Marcus Licinius Crassus, one of Rome's most powerful men, leads his legions into the deserts of Carrhae. His target, the Parthian Empire, a rising power known for its deadly horse archers. But Crassus, blinded by dreams of glory and gold, ignores warnings about the harsh terrain and the Parthians' unmatched cavalry tactics. What follows isn't just a defeat, it's a massacre that reshapes Roman history. The Parthians, masters of hit-and-run warfare, lure Crassus' forces deeper into the arid plains, where the Romans, weighed down by heavy armor, bake under the relentless sun. Then comes the storm of arrows, thousands upon thousands, raining down with terrifying precision. The Parthian horse archers never engage in close combat. Instead, they circle the exhausted Romans, firing endlessly from a distance. Crassus' son, Publius, leads a desperate charge to break the enemy lines, only to be cut down with his entire cavalry unit. By day's end, nearly 20,000 Roman soldiers lie dead, and Crassus himself is captured and executed in a gruesome spectacle. Legend says molten gold was poured down his throat, a cruel symbol of his greed. But the true mystery of Carrhae isn't just the scale of the loss, it's what vanished in its aftermath. The Parthians seized the sacred Roman military standards, the eagle-topped symbols of legionary pride. For Rome, this is an unimaginable disgrace. These eagles aren't just flags, they're sacred objects, believed to hold the favor of the gods. Their loss becomes an open wound, a humiliation that future emperors like Augustus will spend fortunes and decades trying to undo. Diplomats negotiate, gold changes hands, but the eagles remain stubbornly out of reach. Then there's the eerie fate of the survivors. Ancient sources whisper of Roman prisoners marched eastward, never to return. Some accounts suggest they were sent as far as Central Asia, even blending into local populations. Could descendants of these lost legionaries have fought elsewhere, their stories erased by time? Modern historians still debate how many escaped the slaughter and whether scattered groups made it back to Roman territory, carrying tales of horror that would echo through generations. Carrhae wasn't just a battle, it was a turning point. It shattered the myth of Roman invincibility, exposed the limits of their heavy infantry, and forced a reckoning with the Parthians' lethal tactics. And those missing eagles, they'd become a ghostly obsession, a symbol of unfinished business that would shape Rome's eastern ambitions for years to come. But the story of Carrhae doesn't end with the battle's brutal aftermath. Shifting our focus to the sands of time, another layer of mystery emerges, one tied to the very roads that connected empires. The Silk Road, that legendary network of trade routes stretching from China to the Mediterranean, may hold clues to the battlefield's elusive location and the fate of Crassus' lost legionaries. For centuries, the shifting dunes and bustling caravan paths of the Silk Road obscured the exact site of the massacre. Unlike static European battlefields marked by monuments or ruins, Carrhae's terrain was constantly reshaped by merchants, nomads, and the elements. Some historians argue the battle occurred near modern-day Harran in Turkey, while others place it farther east where ancient trade routes converged. The debate hinges on scattered artifacts, Roman coins, arrowheads, and fragments of armor found along these ancient highways, hinting at where the Parthians might have ambushed Crassus' forces. Then there's the chilling theory of the caravan graves. Ancient sources mention mass burials of Roman soldiers, their bodies left unclaimed in the desert. Could these graves lie hidden beneath the Silk Road itself? Archaeologists speculate that Parthian victors, eager to clear the trade routes for their lucrative commerce, dumped Roman dead in pits along caravan paths, later buried by centuries of dust and foot traffic. Ground-penetrating radar surveys near Harran have revealed anomalies, unnatural clusters beneath the soil, but excavations remain inconclusive. Were these Roman bones or simply the remnants of later travelers? The Silk Road's role as a cultural blender adds another twist. Some accounts suggest Parthians sold captured Romans as slaves to distant Silk Road traders, dispersing them as far as Bactria or even the edges of Han China. A tantalizing 2nd century Chinese text describes mercenaries with fish-scale armor and shield formations, details eerily reminiscent of Roman tactics. Could these be echoes of Carrhae's survivors, their legacy absorbed into the tapestry of the East? What's certain is this: the Silk Road didn't just carry silk and spices, it may have carried secrets. The same routes that enriched empires also scattered the traces of Carrhae, leaving historians to piece together a puzzle where trade and tragedy intertwined. As we move forward, another battlefield awaits, one where Caesar's ambition clashed with a Gallic chieftain's defiance, and where earthworks hide answers beneath French soil. Now let's journey from the shifting sands of Carrhae to the rolling hills of Gaul, where another legendary clash remains shrouded in mystery: the Siege of Alesia. This was Julius Caesar's defining moment, a brutal showdown against the Gallic chieftain Vercingetorix that would decide the fate of an entire region. But even today, the exact location of this epic siege is hotly debated, buried beneath layers of history and competing theories. Caesar's own writings paint a vivid picture of Alesia, a towering hilltop fortress surrounded by massive Roman siegeworks, a double ring of trenches and palisades stretching for miles. His goal was simple: starve Vercingetorix into surrender by cutting off all escape routes. The Gauls, trapped inside, faced unimaginable horrors, while a relief force of thousands attacked Caesar's outer defenses. In the end, it was a masterclass in Roman engineering and sheer determination. But where did this all unfold? For centuries, the village of Alesia Saint-Trianis in Burgundy was accepted as the site, thanks to Napoleon III's enthusiastic excavations in the 1860s. Archaeologists uncovered remnants of Caesar's siegeworks, ditches, weapon fragments, even coins minted during the Gallic Wars. But skeptics argue the terrain doesn't quite match Caesar's descriptions. The hills around Alesia Saint-Trianis, they say, aren't steep enough to align with his accounts of the Gauls' desperate downhill charges. This skepticism sparked a hunt for alternatives. One compelling theory points to Chalk's Descrotone in the Jura Mountains, where amateur archaeologists claim to have found traces of siegeworks on a far grander scale. The topography here, a narrow plateau flanked by steep slopes, seems to fit Caesar's narrative better, yet mainstream scholars dismiss these findings, citing a lack of definitive Roman artifacts. The debate isn't just academic, it's about how we remember history. If Alesia Saint-Trianis is indeed Alesia, then modern France has long honored the right spot with its towering statue of Vercingetorix. But if the true battlefield lies elsewhere, it means an entire region's identity has been built on a potential misplacement. What's undeniable is Caesar's brilliance at Alesia, a siege so meticulously planned it's still studied in military academies today. Yet the ground beneath our feet keeps its secrets, leaving us to wonder, did history get the location right, or is the real Alesia still waiting to be found? As we turn the page, another battlefield beckons, one where Gothic warriors would rewrite the destiny of Rome itself. Now, as we leave the unresolved mystery of Alesia behind, let's step onto the sun-baked plains of Adrianople, where one of Rome's most catastrophic defeats unfolded. The year was 378, and the Eastern Roman Empire faced a Gothic uprising that would change the course of history. This wasn't just a battle, it was a massacre that exposed the crumbling might of Rome and heralded the beginning of the end for its imperial dominance. The Goths, refugees fleeing the Huns, had been mistreated by Roman officials, denied food, and even forced to sell their children into slavery. When they finally revolted, Emperor Valens, underestimating their fury, marched out to crush them with an overconfident army. What followed was a disaster. The Gothic cavalry, swift and relentless, outmaneuvered the Romans while their infantry held firm against repeated charges. By nightfall, 2/3 of Valens' forces lay dead, including the emperor himself. His body never recovered. The shockwaves of Adrianople echoed across the empire, proving that Rome's legions were no longer invincible. Yet pinpointing where this pivotal clash happened is anything but straightforward. Ancient sources describe the battle taking place near Adrianople, modern-day Edirne in Turkey, but the exact spot is hotly debated. Some archaeologists argue it occurred on the flat plains north of the city, ideal for the Goths' cavalry tactics. Others insist the fighting spilled into rolling foothills, where Roman troops could have been ambushed in broken terrain. The lack of definitive physical evidence, mass graves, weapon caches, or even the remnants of Valens' lost camp only deepens the mystery. Complicating matters further, the landscape has shifted dramatically over the centuries. Rivers have changed course, farmland has erased potential clues, and urban expansion has buried possible sites under layers of modern development. Even the accounts from Roman historians, our primary sources, offer conflicting details about distances and landmarks, leaving scholars to piece together a puzzle with missing fragments. What's undeniable is Adrianople's legacy. This battle didn't just kill an emperor, it shattered the myth of Roman invincibility and paved the way for the Gothic migrations that would eventually topple the Western Empire. Yet the ground where it all happened keeps its secrets, a silent witness to a turning point in history. As we move forward, another battlefield awaits, one where nature itself conspired to erase the traces of a forgotten massacre. Now let's dive beneath the waves to uncover a battle lost to the sea for over 2,000 years. The year was 241 BC, and the waters near the Egates Islands witnessed the final, decisive clash of the First Punic War. This wasn't just another naval skirmish, it was the moment Rome shattered Carthage's naval dominance, ending a grueling 23-year conflict that had drained both empires. The battle was a masterstroke of Roman ingenuity. After years of costly defeats at sea, Rome rebuilt its fleet from scratch, this time with lighter, faster ships designed to outmaneuver Carthage's heavier vessels. The Carthaginians, confident in their seasoned sailors, never saw the trap coming. As their lumbering ships, laden with supplies for their Sicilian garrisons, rounded the Egates, the Roman fleet struck. What followed was a slaughter. The Romans, using their agile vessels to ram and board, sank or captured nearly half of Carthage's navy in a single morning. The defeat was so crushing that Carthage had no choice but to surrender, handing Sicily over to Rome and marking the birth of Rome's naval empire. For centuries, the exact location of this battle remained a mystery, its wreckage hidden beneath layers of silt and shifting currents. But modern underwater archaeology is finally bringing it to light. Using advanced sonar and remotely operated vehicles, researchers have pinpointed the battlefield, a stretch of seabed littered with bronze rams, the very weapons that sealed Carthage's fate. These rams, some still bearing inscriptions, reveal the brutal efficiency of Roman tactics. Nearby, the skeletal remains of warships lie half-buried, their timbers preserved by the sea's cold embrace. Each artifact tells a story, A shattered amphora hints at a ship's frantic last moments, while a bent sword suggests a desperate final stand. What makes these discoveries so remarkable is how they rewrite history. For years, scholars debated ancient accounts of the battle, questioning their accuracy. Now, the physical evidence confirms Rome's tactical brilliance and Carthage's fatal miscalculation. But the sea hasn't given up all its secrets. Many wrecks remain undiscovered, their cargoes of weapons and personal effects still waiting to be found. As technology improves, who knows what else might surface? The Egates battle didn't just end a war, it reshaped the ancient world, setting Rome on the path to empire. And as we resurface from these depths, another forgotten battlefield calls, one where nature didn't just hide the evidence, it swallowed it whole. Now, let's journey east to a river that once ran red with the blood of princes. The year was 1223, and the Kalka River became the stage for one of the most brutal and one-sided battles in history. Here, the Mongol horde, led by the brilliant generals Subutai and Gebe, faced off against a coalition of Russian princes who underestimated the storm gathering on the steppe. The Mongols didn't just defeat their enemies, they orchestrated a massacre. Luring the overconfident Russian forces into a trap, they feigned retreat, drawing them deeper into the open plains. Then, with terrifying precision, the Mongol cavalry wheeled around and unleashed a hail of arrows, cutting down the disorganized Russian ranks. The princes, used to the chivalric combat of Europe, were unprepared for the Mongols' ruthless tactics. Those who weren't slaughtered on the spot were captured and crushed beneath wooden platforms as the victorious Mongols celebrated atop their bodies, a grim warning to any who dared resist. But why has this battlefield proven so hard to find? The Kalka River itself holds the answer. Over the centuries, its course has shifted dramatically, swallowing the evidence of the carnage. The very ground where thousands fell now lies buried under layers of silt or submerged beneath new channels. Local legends speak of bones occasionally washing up after heavy rains, but systematic searches have been thwarted by the river's relentless movement. Recent efforts, however, are starting to piece together the puzzle. Archaeologists, using ground-penetrating radar and sediment analysis, have identified likely sites where the battle may have occurred. A handful of arrowheads and fragments of armor have surfaced, all bearing the unmistakable marks of Mongol craftsmanship. Yet the full scale of the devastation remains hidden, locked away by the river's ever-changing path. The Battle of Kalka River wasn't just a military defeat, it was a wake-up call. The Mongols would return a decade later, and this time they wouldn't stop at the riverside. But for now, the Kalka keeps its secrets, a silent witness to the day the steppe's shadow fell across Russia. And as we leave these haunted waters behind, another forgotten clash awaits, one where an empire's fate was decided not by swords but by the earth itself. From the shifting waters of the Kalka River, we now turn to the dense forests and rolling fields of medieval Europe, where another forgotten battlefield hides its secrets beneath the soil. The year is 1410, and the fields near Grunwald are about to witness one of the largest and bloodiest clashes of the Middle Ages. Here, the Teutonic Knights, a fearsome order of warrior monks, faced a united force of Poles and Lithuanians in a battle that would reshape the balance of power in Eastern Europe. The Teutonic Knights, clad in their iconic white mantles adorned with black crosses, were confident in their military prowess. But their opponents, led by King W. Ladislaw Jagiello of Poland and Grand Duke Vytautas of Lithuania, had a plan. Using the terrain to their advantage, they lured the knights into a brutal melee where their heavy cavalry became bogged down in the mud. The fighting was so intense that chroniclers wrote of rivers of blood and piles of bodies so high they obscured the battlefield. By day's end, the Teutonic Order lay shattered, their Grand Master dead, and their reputation as invincible warriors crushed. Yet despite its historical significance, the exact location of the Battle of Grunwald remains elusive. Unlike other battlefields where monuments mark the carnage, Grunwald's trenches and mass graves have vanished beneath centuries of ploughing and reforestation. Local farmers still occasionally unearth fragments of armor or weapons, silent reminders of the chaos that once unfolded here. But the full scale of the burial sites has stayed hidden, leaving historians to wonder where the fallen knights and soldiers truly rest. Modern technology, however, is beginning to peel back the layers of time. Archaeologists armed with ground-penetrating radar have identified anomalies in the soil disturbances that suggest large pits, possibly mass graves. Some of these sites align with medieval accounts of where the heaviest fighting occurred, offering tantalizing clues. But the work is slow, as researchers must painstakingly distinguish between natural soil variations and the scars of ancient battle. The Battle of Grunwald wasn't just a military defeat for the Teutonic Knights, it was the beginning of their decline. And as the search for their lost trenches continues, each new discovery brings us closer to understanding the true cost of that fateful day. Now, let's journey forward in time to another battlefield where the mud itself became a weapon and the stakes were just as high. Leaving behind the tangled forests of Grunwald, we step onto the rain-soaked fields of northern France where history and legend collide. The year is 1415, and the Battle of Agincourt is about to unfold, a clash that would cement Henry V of England's reputation as a military genius. But beneath the tales of heroic longbowmen and chivalric glory lies a battlefield shrouded in mystery and misconception. For centuries, the story of Agincourt has been told with a heavy dose of myth. Popular imagination paints the battle as a triumph of the underdog, where a small, bedraggled English army, knee-deep in mud, unleashed a storm of arrows to decimate the flower of French nobility. But modern research tells a more complicated story. The infamous mud, often blamed for bogging down the French cavalry, may not have been as deep or widespread as once believed. Soil studies suggest the terrain was firm in some areas, forcing historians to rethink how much the mud truly influenced the battle's outcome. Another puzzle lies in the positioning of Henry's archers. These longbowmen were the backbone of his army, yet their exact locations on the field remain hotly debated. Some accounts place them on the flanks, raining death from the sides, while others argue they formed a deadly crescent at the front. The lack of physical evidence, no mass graves, no concentrated arrowheads has left archaeologists scrambling for clues. Even the battlefield's precise boundaries are uncertain, with competing theories placing the action across several nearby fields. What isn't disputed is the sheer devastation. The French, weighed down by heavy armor and hampered by poor coordination, were cut down in droves. English arrows found gaps in visors, horses panicked, and the press of bodies became so suffocating that many knights drowned in the mud. By the battle's end, thousands of French nobles lay dead, their loss sending shockwaves through Europe. Agincourt's legacy endures, but its physical traces have all but vanished. Unlike other battlefields where monuments or preserved earthworks mark the carnage, Agincourt's plains have quietly returned to farmland. Local historians still scour the area for artifacts, but the land gives up its secrets grudgingly. Every rusted arrowhead or broken spur is a tiny piece of a much larger puzzle, one that continues to challenge what we think we know about this iconic battle. Now, let's turn our attention eastward, where another forgotten battlefield hides beneath the weight of history and urban sprawl. Shifting our gaze to the heart of India, we arrive at a battlefield that changed the course of an empire, yet today it's nearly invisible beneath modern life. The year is 1526, and the plains of Panipat are about to witness a clash that would birth the mighty Mughal dynasty. Here, Babur, a descendant of Timur and Genghis Khan, faced off against the formidable Sultan Ibrahim Lodi in a battle that hinged on one revolutionary weapon, gunpowder. Babur's victory at Panipat wasn't just a triumph of numbers or bravery, it was a masterclass in tactical innovation. While Lodi's forces relied on traditional war elephants and massed infantry, Babur deployed something far more devastating: cannons. These early firearms, positioned behind a barrier of linked carts, shattered Lodi's charges with thunderous volleys, but the real genius lay in how Babur used them. Unlike European armies of the time, which treated cannons as static siege weapons, Babur's forces maneuvered them like chess pieces, repositioning mid-battle to exploit gaps in Lodi's lines. The result was carnage. By day's end, Sultan Ibrahim lay dead and the Mughal era had begun. Yet if you visit Panipat today, you'll struggle to find any trace of this pivotal moment. The battlefield lies buried beneath highways, factories, and neighborhoods, a casualty of India's rapid urbanization. Local historians point to a modest memorial pillar, but even its exact relationship to the battle's epicenter is debated. Archaeologists face a daunting challenge. How do you excavate a site when it's now someone's backyard or a bustling market? Occasionally, construction crews stumble upon artifacts, a rusted cannonball, a fragment of chainmail, but these finds are fleeting glimpses, not the full story. The loss of Panipat's physical landscape isn't just a problem for historians, it's a missed opportunity to understand how warfare evolved. Babur's use of gunpowder marked a turning point, yet without the battlefield's topography, we can't fully grasp how terrain influenced his tactics. Were his cannons positioned on a slight rise? Did Lodi's elephants struggle in unseen ditches? These questions may never be answered. What remains, though, is the battle's legacy. Panipat didn't just crown Babur, it reshaped India's identity, blending Central Asian and Indian traditions into something new. As we move forward, we'll see how other battlefields suffered similar fates, their stories fading beneath the march of progress. But next, we journey to the sun-drenched vineyards of Italy, where an equally forgotten clash hides beneath rows of grapevines. Now, let's turn our attention to the rolling hills of Italy, where the earth holds secrets of a forgotten clash between two European powers. The year is 1544, and the quiet vineyards of Ceresole hide a brutal battle that once shook the continent. Here, French and Spanish armies collided in a bloody struggle for dominance, leaving behind a legacy now buried beneath layers of soil and grapevines. What makes Ceresole unique isn't just its disappearance, it's how the battle defied expectations. Unlike the gunpowder revolution at Panipat, Ceresole was a brutal melee where pikes and swords decided the day. The French, led by the ambitious Duke of Enghien, faced off against the Spanish under the seasoned Marquis del Vasto. Both sides were evenly matched, but the French had one advantage: Swiss mercenaries, whose disciplined pikemen carved through Spanish ranks with terrifying efficiency. The fighting was so intense that by the end, nearly half of both armies lay dead or wounded, a staggering toll for a single afternoon. Yet today, if you walk through Ceresole's vineyards, you'd never guess the ground beneath your feet was once soaked in blood. Unlike other lost battlefields swallowed by cities, this one vanished under agriculture. The very soil that nourishes grapes also preserves fragments of the past: rusty sword hilts, broken spur buckles, even the occasional musket ball, all turned up by plows over the centuries. But these scattered clues only hint at the larger puzzle. Without the battlefield's original layout, historians can't fully reconstruct how the French flanking maneuvers or Spanish counterattacks unfolded. The irony is that Ceresole's obscurity might actually protect it. While urban expansion erased Panipat, the slow rhythm of vineyard life has kept this site relatively undisturbed. Archaeologists speculate that beneath the vines, intact mass graves or weapon caches could still lie hidden, waiting for the right technology to reveal them. For now, though, the battle remains half-remembered, its lessons fading like an old soldier's scars. As we leave Italy's sunlit slopes, we'll next dive into a battlefield lost to something even more relentless than time, nature itself. The marshes of White Mountain swallowed not just artifacts but an entire rebellion's hope. From the sun-drenched vineyards of Ceresole, we now journey into the mist-shrouded marshes where nature itself became a weapon. The year is 1620, and the soggy lowlands beneath White Mountain are about to witness a rebellion's last gasp. Here, the Protestant Bohemian nobles made their doomed stand against the Catholic Habsburgs, a clash that would reshape Europe but leave barely a trace in the earth. What makes White Mountain haunting isn't just the battle's outcome, but how the landscape conspired to erase it. Unlike Ceresole's orderly vineyards, this was a terrain of sucking bogs and shifting ponds where heavy armor became a death sentence. The Bohemian rebels, though outnumbering their enemies, were poorly positioned on waterlogged ground. When imperial cavalry charged at dawn, their horses churned the marsh into a nightmare of mud. Soldiers sank to their waists, swords stuck in the mire, as the Habsburgs' disciplined tercios advanced like a slow, unstoppable tide. Within 2 hours, the revolt was over thousands dead or fleeing, their cause drowned in the wetlands. Yet the real mystery lies in what happened after the fighting stopped. While Ceresole's artifacts surfaced in plowed fields, White Mountain's marshland swallowed everything. Swords, muskets, even the bones of the fallen gradually sank into the anaerobic mud, preserved but invisible. Local legends speak of ghostly lights flickering over the bogs, perhaps methane from decaying armor, but archaeologists face a unique challenge. The very water that protects relics also hides them. Metal detectors fail in the mineral-rich soil, and probing risks damaging fragile remains. The swamp's hunger for history goes deeper than artifacts. This battle didn't just end a rebellion, it erased a cultural moment. Protestant Bohemia's dreams of independence dissolved like morning fog, leaving behind only cryptic clues. A pewter button stamped with a defiant lion, a waterlogged prayer book recovered during drainage work. These fragments hint at stories we'll never fully recover. As we pull free from White Mountain's clinging mud, our next stop reveals how farmland can conceal an empire's ambition. The fields of Breitenfeld hold secrets not of loss, but of revolutionary tactics that changed warfare forever. Leaving the marshes behind, we step onto the open plains where wheat and history grow side by side. The year is 1631, and the fields of Breitenfeld are about to witness a military revolution. Here, King Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden didn't just win a battle, he rewrote the rules of war. But the very farmland that witnessed his triumph now hides the secrets of how he did it. Gustavus Adolphus arrived at Breitenfeld with an army that looked nothing like the rigid formations of his enemies. While the Catholic forces relied on massive, slow-moving tercios blocks of pikemen and musketeers, the Swedes fought in flexible lines, their musketeers firing in rolling volleys. This wasn't just a new tactic, it was a complete reimagining of battlefield strategy, combining firepower with mobility in ways Europe had never seen. When the imperial cavalry charged, expecting to scatter the Swedes, they found themselves outmaneuvered and outgunned. Gustavus's innovations turned the tide in under 2 hours, marking the first major Protestant victory of the 30 Years' War. Yet for all its fame, Breitenfeld's battlefield is frustratingly elusive today. Unlike White Mountain's swampy embrace, this land didn't swallow history, it simply plowed it under. Centuries of farming have leveled the gentle ridges where Swedish musketeers stood, scattering artifacts across furrows. Archaeologists face a different challenge here. The soil isn't hiding relics, it's mixing them. A musket ball found near Breitenfeld could be from the battle, or from a hunter's shot 200 years later. Even the famous Swedish trench, where Gustavus's men supposedly anchored their line, vanishes under crops each summer, leaving historians to debate its exact path. What makes Breitenfeld's disappearance so ironic is how thoroughly it was documented. Maps from the era show troop positions in detail, but matching those sketches to modern GPS coordinates is like fitting a puzzle with missing pieces. Local farmers occasionally turn up belt buckles or broken swords, but these finds are scattered like breadcrumbs across miles of grain fields. The battle's true scale only emerges when you realize those unassuming acres once held 40,000 men, a number hard to picture when standing in today's quiet countryside. As the sun sets over Breitenfeld's golden fields, we're reminded that some battlefields fade not by nature's hand, but by humanity's need to feed itself. Next, we'll see how a river's relentless flow reshaped the memory of another decisive clash where water, not wheat, became history's eraser. Now we turn our attention to a battle where water carved away more than just land, it reshaped history itself. The year is 1704, and the fields of Blenheim stand as a testament to one of the greatest military triumphs of the age. Here, the Duke of Marlborough led an allied force to a stunning victory against the French, a battle so decisive it changed the course of the War of the Spanish Succession. But the very landscape that witnessed this clash has been quietly slipping away piece by piece for centuries. Marlborough's brilliance lay in his ability to read the terrain like a chessboard. The battlefield at Blenheim was defined by its ravines, steep, narrow cuts in the earth that funneled troops into deadly killing zones. His forces used these natural barriers to trap the French army, splitting their lines and crushing them in detail. The victory was so complete that it shattered the myth of French invincibility and cemented Marlborough's reputation as a master tactician. Yet today, those same ravines that dictated the battle's outcome are nearly unrecognizable. The culprit, the relentless flow of the Nebel River. Over the centuries, seasonal floods and erosion have softened the sharp edges of the ravines, smoothing them into gentle slopes. What was once a stark, tactical feature has blurred into the countryside, making it difficult for historians to pinpoint exactly where key moments of the battle unfolded. Even contemporary maps drawn with care by engineers who walked the field now seem to depict a landscape that no longer exists. Archaeologists face a unique challenge here. Unlike battlefields swallowed by forests or buried under cities, Blenheim's terrain has been subtly rewritten by water. Metal detectors turn up musket balls and uniform buttons, but these finds are scattered along altered riverbanks, leaving researchers to guess how far the original ravines once extended. Some argue that entire sections of the battlefield now lie beneath layers of silt, their secrets carried downstream by the Nebel's currents. What makes Blenheim's disappearance so poignant is how vividly it was recorded in its time. Eyewitness accounts describe the ravines in precise detail, yet standing on the modern field, those descriptions feel like echoes of a vanished world. The river didn't erase the battle's memory, it simply made the stage on which it was fought harder to see. As we leave Blenheim behind, we're reminded that even the earth beneath our feet is never truly still. Next, we'll venture into a battlefield where nature's reclamation was far less gentle, a place where the jungle didn't just hide history, it consumed it whole. Now we journey to a battle where betrayal and nature conspired to rewrite history. The year is 1757, and the fields of Plassey in Bengal become the stage for a clash that would alter the fate of India. Here, Robert Clive, a cunning British officer, faced off against the Nawab of Bengal, Suraj ud-Dowla, in a battle less about military might and more about deception. The story of Plassey is one of treachery as much as tactics. Clive's victory didn't come from superior firepower or brilliant maneuvers, it came from bribes and broken promises. He secretly negotiated with the Nawab's own commanders, turning them against their leader. When the fighting began, many of Suraj's forces simply stood aside or switched sides, leaving him isolated. The battle itself was brief, almost an anticlimax, but its consequences were enormous. Plassey marked the beginning of British dominance in India, a foothold that would grow into an empire. Yet today, the battlefield itself is nearly impossible to recognize. Unlike other lost battlefields swallowed by cities or eroded by rivers, Plassey was reclaimed by something far more relentless, the jungle. The dense forests of Bengal, with their tangled roots and creeping vines, have swallowed the open fields where Clive's betrayal unfolded. What was once a clear plain, dotted with mango groves and marshland, is now a thick green wilderness. Archaeologists face a unique challenge here. The humid climate and rapid plant growth have accelerated decay, leaving few physical traces of the battle. Cannonballs and musket rounds, if they exist at all, are buried under layers of leaf litter and soil. Even the mango tree under which Clive supposedly planned his strategy has vanished, its exact location lost to time. Local legends persist, but the jungle guards its secrets fiercely. What makes Plassey's disappearance so haunting is how quickly it happened. Within decades, travelers reported that the battlefield was already becoming unrecognizable. Unlike Blenheim, where erosion worked slowly, nature here moved with startling speed, as if eager to cover the scars of betrayal. Today, only a solitary monument stands as a reminder, a silent witness to a battle that changed the course of history but left no visible mark on the land. As we step away from the shadows of Plassey's jungle, we're reminded that some battlefields vanish not just from sight, but from memory itself. Next, we'll dive beneath the waves to a clash where the sea itself became the graveyard of empires. Now we leave the tangled jungles of Plassey behind and plunge into the depths of the Atlantic, where an entire fleet rests in silent testimony to one of history's most decisive naval battles. The year is 1805, and off the coast of Cape Trafalgar, Admiral Horatio Nelson led the British Royal Navy to a crushing victory over the combined French and Spanish fleets. This wasn't just a battle, it was a masterclass in naval warfare that shattered Napoleon's dreams of invading Britain. Nelson's bold strategy defied convention. Instead of lining up ships parallel to the enemy, he split his fleet into two columns and drove them straight through the Franco-Spanish line, breaking their formation into chaos. The British crews, better trained and faster at reloading, pounded their opponents with relentless broadsides. Nelson himself paid the ultimate price, struck by a sniper's bullet during the fighting, but his victory was absolute. 22 enemy ships were captured or destroyed without a single British vessel lost. Yet today, the physical remnants of this battle lie scattered across the ocean floor, hidden beneath layers of sand and time. Unlike land battlefields, Trafalgar's wreckage is preserved in a watery grave, but that doesn't mean it's safe. The very depths that protect these ships also make them vulnerable. Treasure hunters and looters have targeted the wrecks for decades, drawn by the promise of gold coins, cannons, and personal artifacts. Some wrecks have been stripped bare, their historical context destroyed for profit. Underwater archaeology faces unique hurdles here. Saltwater corrosion, shifting currents, and the sheer depth of the wrecks make excavation painstakingly slow. Yet researchers persist, using sonar and submersibles to map the debris fields. Each recovered artifact, a sailor's button, a ship's bell, helps piece together the human stories behind the battle. These wrecks aren't just relics, they're war graves with the bones of thousands still resting within their timbers. The fight to protect Trafalgar's legacy continues. Spain and Britain have clashed over salvage rights, while archaeologists race against time and looters to document what remains. Some wrecks, like the famed Spanish ship Santissima Trinidad, have become pilgrimage sites for divers, their broken hulls now home to swaying kelp and curious fish. It's a haunting transformation from instruments of war to silent reefs, where history and nature intertwine. As we surface from these sunken battlefields, we're reminded that some conflicts never truly end. The struggle to preserve Trafalgar's memory mirrors the eternal tension between history and oblivion. Next, we'll march into the frozen heart of Russia, where another vanished battlefield hides beneath layers of snow and myth. Leaving the sunken echoes of Trafalgar behind, we now journey eastward to the vast plains of Russia, where one of history's most infamous battles was fought and then rewritten. The year is 1812, and Napoleon's Grand Army, 500,000 strong, marches toward Moscow, only to meet a brutal check at the village of Borodino. This wasn't just a battle, it was a blood-soaked stalemate that would ultimately unravel an empire. Napoleon's strategy was straightforward: crush the Russian army in a single, decisive blow. But the Russians, led by General Kutuzov, had other plans. They dug in along a series of ridges and valleys, turning the landscape itself into a weapon. For over 15 hours, the two sides hammered at each other, with casualties reaching staggering numbers. Nearly 70,000 men fell in a single day. The French technically won the field, but at such a horrific cost that it became the definition of a Pyrrhic victory. Napoleon's troops were too exhausted to pursue the retreating Russians, and just weeks later, the infamous retreat from Moscow began, sealing his doom. Yet the true story of Borodino doesn't just lie in the battle itself. It's buried beneath layers of myth and political spin. In the Soviet era, the battlefield was transformed into a propaganda tool. Memorials and monuments were erected not to reflect the actual terrain, but to fit a narrative of Russian resilience and sacrifice. Key hills were flattened, trenches were moved, and even the placement of troops was misrepresented to align with Soviet ideals. The result, a sanitized version of history that obscures the chaos and desperation of that day. Modern historians and archaeologists face a unique challenge here. Unlike other battlefields where nature reclaims the land, Borodino's landscape was deliberately altered. Ground-penetrating radar and old soldier diaries have revealed discrepancies between the actual fighting and the memorialized version. For example, the famous Rivsky Redoubt, a pivotal defensive position, was reconstructed in the wrong location, skewing our understanding of the battle's flow. Even the sprawling museum on the site perpetuates myths, prioritizing patriotism over accuracy. But fragments of truth still emerge. Local farmers occasionally unearth musket balls, belt buckles, and even skeletal remains, silent witnesses to the carnage. These artifacts tell a different story, one of confusion, bravery, and unimaginable suffering. The valleys of Borodino may have vanished under the weight of ideology, but the echoes of that day still whisper beneath the soil. As we step away from these contested fields, we're reminded that history is often a battleground itself, shaped not just by events, but by those who later claim to remember them. Next, we'll venture into the scorching grasslands of Africa, where another forgotten clash waits to be uncovered. Now, let's turn our gaze to the rolling hills of southern Africa, where the earth still holds the scars of one of the most shocking defeats in British military history. The year is 1879, and the setting is Isandlwana, a name that would become synonymous with disaster for the British Empire. Here, beneath the shadow of a distinctive rocky outcrop, a force of 20,000 Zulu warriors launched a devastating attack on a British camp, leaving behind a battlefield soaked in blood and controversy. The British, armed with rifles and artillery, were confident in their superiority, but the Zulu kingdom under King Cetshwayo had perfected a battle strategy that turned their traditional weapons, spears and shields, into instruments of terrifying efficiency. The Zulu impis, or regiments, moved with precision, encircling the British forces in a tactic known as the Horns of the Buffalo. By the time the sun set on January 22nd, over 1,300 British and Allied troops lay dead, their bodies strewn across the plain. It was a humiliating blow to imperial pride, one that sent shockwaves through London. Yet the story of Isandlwana doesn't end with the battle. To this day, the exact locations of mass graves remain a point of fierce debate. The British, in their haste to retreat, left their dead largely unburied, and the Zulu, following custom, avoided touching the corpses of their enemies. As a result, the bones of the fallen were scattered by scavengers and weather, making it nearly impossible for archaeologists to pinpoint where the heaviest fighting occurred. Local oral histories clash with British military records, each offering conflicting accounts of where the dead were finally laid to rest. Modern technology has only deepened the mystery. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have revealed anomalies in the soil, possible graves, but without excavation, these remain theories. Some historians argue that the British later returned to hastily bury their comrades in unmarked pits, while others believe the Zulu eventually interred the bodies in secret out of respect or superstition. The lack of clear evidence has led to tensions between descendants of both sides. with some calling for memorials and others insisting the land be left undisturbed as sacred ground. Artifacts still surface from time to time: rusted belt buckles, broken rifles, and the occasional human bone, silent reminders of the chaos that unfolded here. Each discovery reignites debates over how the battle should be remembered and by whom. Isandlwana isn't just a lost battlefield, it's a wound that hasn't fully healed, a story still being written by those who claim its legacy. As we move from these contested hills, our next stop takes us to the dense forests of Eastern Europe, where another forgotten clash lies waiting beneath the trees. Now let's journey from the sun-scorched plains of Africa to the shadowy woodlands of Eastern Europe, where the echoes of another forgotten battle linger beneath the trees. The year is 1914, and the forests of Tannenberg bear silent witness to one of World War I's most devastating encirclements. Here, amid the dense pines and birch groves, the German army executed a masterful trap, surrounding and crushing the Russian Second Army in a battle that would reshape the Eastern Front. The Russian forces, led by General Alexander Samsonov, marched confidently into East Prussia, only to find themselves ensnared in a German pincer movement. Outmaneuvered and outgunned, the Russians faced relentless artillery barrages and machine gun fire as their supply lines collapsed. By the battle's end, nearly 100,000 Russian soldiers were dead, wounded, or captured, while Samsonov, overwhelmed by the scale of the disaster, took his own life in the surrounding woods. The German victory was so complete that they named it after Tannenberg, a symbolic revenge for a medieval defeat, yet the battlefield itself would soon vanish. Unlike the Western Front's scarred landscapes where trenches and craters remain etched into the earth, Tannenberg's traces were swallowed by time and nature. In the decades after the war, aggressive reforestation efforts transformed the area, burying trench lines and artillery positions under layers of moss and roots. Today, even with advanced technology like LiDAR scanning, pinpointing the exact locations of key engagements is a challenge. The forest floor hides rusted rifles, shattered helmets, and the occasional bone, but the full scope of the battle is lost beneath the canopy. Local historians and archaeologists face a unique dilemma. While some advocate for excavation to honor the fallen, others argue the forest itself is a living memorial, its quietude a fitting tribute to the chaos once endured here. The debate reflects a broader tension between preservation and discovery, a theme we've seen echoed across these lost battlefields. As we leave the whispering pines of Tannenberg, our next destination plunges us into the frigid waters of the North Sea, where the wreckage of another clash lies hidden beneath the waves. Now let's dive beneath the waves to uncover a battlefield unlike any other, a clash not on land, but in the churning waters of the North Sea. The Battle of Jutland, fought in the spring of 1916, remains the largest naval confrontation of World War I, a brutal showdown between the British Royal Navy and Germany's High Seas Fleet. Over the course of 36 hours, 250 ships exchanged fire in a chaotic dance of steel and smoke, leaving 25 vessels and nearly 9,000 men lost to the depths. Unlike traditional battlefields, Jutland's wreckage lies scattered across the seafloor, preserved in the cold, dark embrace of the ocean. Sunken dreadnoughts, twisted cruisers, and shattered destroyers rest as silent tombs, many still holding the remains of their crews. These wrecks are more than relics, they're war graves, a fact that has sparked fierce debate among historians, archaeologists, and salvage companies. The ethical dilemma is stark. On one hand, recovering artifacts could shed light on the battle's untold stories, like the mysterious explosion that doomed the British battlecruiser HMS Invincible, or the defiant last stand of the German cruiser Wiesbaden. On the other, disturbing these sites risks desecrating the final resting places of thousands. Some argue that technology, like underwater drones and 3D mapping, allows us to study the wrecks without touching them, while others warn that even non-invasive exploration could attract looters. Complicating matters further, the sea itself is an unpredictable custodian. saltwater corrosion, strong currents, and even trawling nets have already damaged several wrecks. The British destroyer HMS Defence, for example, was recently found torn apart, its hull scattered across the seabed. Without careful stewardship, these underwater time capsules could vanish entirely, taking their secrets with them. As we navigate these murky moral waters, one thing is clear. Jutland's submerged battlefield forces us to weigh curiosity against respect and progress against preservation. And with that, we turn our gaze to the final chapter of our journey, a battlefield swallowed not by sea or forest, but by the relentless advance of jungle and monsoon rains. Now, let's journey from the depths of the ocean to the tangled heart of a jungle, where nature has worked tirelessly to erase the scars of war. The Battle of Imphal, fought in the sweltering summer of 1944, was one of World War II's most brutal yet overlooked confrontations. Here in the dense forests and rolling hills of northeast India, the British and Indian forces clashed with the Japanese army in a desperate struggle that would decide the fate of Southeast Asia. What makes Imphal unique among lost battlefields isn't just the ferocity of the fighting, it's how swiftly the jungle reclaimed the land. Monsoon rains, some of the heaviest on record, turned the terrain into a quagmire, swallowing foxholes, washing away tank tracks, and burying the remnants of war beneath layers of mud and vegetation. Within months, the battlefield vanished, leaving behind only whispers of the conflict. The Japanese, determined to cut off Allied supply lines, launched a daring offensive, but their plans unraveled in the face of relentless rain, disease, and starvation. Thousands of soldiers perished, not just from bullets, but from the jungle itself, malaria, dysentery, and exhaustion claiming as many lives as combat. Today, the exact locations of key engagements, like the desperate stand at Nunshagum Ridge or the chaotic retreat through the Kabul Valley, are nearly impossible to pinpoint. Even the once distinct trenches and gun emplacements have melted back into the earth. Local farmers occasionally stumble upon rusted rifles, tarnished helmets, or the skeletal remains of those who never made it home. Yet these fragments tell only part of the story. Unlike the preserved trenches of Europe or the sunken wrecks of Jutland, Imphal's battlefield is a ghost, its secrets locked beneath vines and monsoon-fed rivers. Historians now rely heavily on survivor accounts and declassified maps to reconstruct the battle, but even these sources are fading with time. As we close our exploration of these 20 lost battlefields, Imphal stands as a stark reminder of nature's power to erase history. But it also challenges us to listen, to the rustling leaves that might hide a foxhole, to the monsoon rains that still whisper of sacrifices made 8 decades ago. The jungle may have won, but the stories remain, waiting for those willing to dig a little deeper. If these untold tales of history captivated you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next journey into the past. Until then, keep exploring, because the Earth still holds countless secrets, and every one of them has a story to tell. As we reflect on these 20 lost battlefields, one truth becomes undeniable: nature is the ultimate historian. From the sunken warships of the Egates to the overgrown trenches of Imphal, each site tells the same silent story. Earth reclaims, rivers shift, jungles swallow. Even the grandest clashes fade beneath layers of time and soil, leaving only fragments for us to decipher. What's equally striking is how fragile our connection to these events really is. Without archaeologists sifting through sand, historians piecing together letters, or locals passing down whispered tales, these battles would vanish twice, first from the land, then from memory. That's why places like Teutoburg Forest or the fields of Grunwald matter. They're not just coordinates on a map, they're reminders of how easily history slips away when we stop listening to the ground beneath our feet. So here's where you come in. Maybe there's a forgotten skirmish in your own hometown, an overgrown fort, or a family story about an ancestor who fought in one of these battles. Share it in the comments because every thread we add helps weave this tapestry back together. Or better yet, visit a preserved battlefield if you can. Walk the lines at Blenheim, stand on the cliffs of Trafalgar, feel the weight of what happened there, and if uncovering these hidden stories excites you, don't let the journey end here. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell because we've only scratched the surface. From buried Roman camps to vanished Mongol outposts, history's shadows are full of secrets waiting to be told. Until next time, keep digging because the past never truly disappears. It just waits for the right moment to speak.